Hi everyone. Here I wanted to look at Joe Biden's recent press conference when he was questioned on the ways the US military has pulled out of Afghanistan, which cost the lives of 13 US Marines and many civilians, and with huge geopolitical implications for the rest of the world. Clearly, the question is what is the point of 20 years of war in Afghanistan, which costs the life of thousands of American troops and coalition forces, and tens of thousands of civilian lives, especially now that it is returned to the Taliban. So this is clearly a defining moment of Biden's shaky presidency. So here he first takes responsibility, but then quickly blames Donald Trump. The question is what are his real motives for the pullout, and in particular what is going on in his head at this moment. There's not much to go on by, but we certainly can look at his body language and nonverbal communication here. So let's get started.
Mr. President, there had not been a U.S. service member killed in combat in Afghanistan since February of 2020. You set a deadline, you pulled troops out, you sent troops back in, and now 12 Marines are dead. You said the buck stops with you. Do you bear any responsibility for the way that things have unfolded in the last 2 weeks?
I bear responsibility for fundamentally all that's happened of late. But here's the deal. You know, I wish you'd one day say these things. You know as well as I do that the former president made a deal with the Taliban.
So what do we see here? So two things stand out. The first one is that he holds on tightly to his notebook, which he presses in front of his chest. So that notebook becomes a barrier, a protective shield, and he looks like a drowning person holding onto a straw. So it's a very defensive gesture. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that there's not much going on in his face. It's very hard to read his face. It's blank. It's like a puppet. So there are very little facial expressions. And there's very little expression of sorrow and agitation and frustration and whatever this situation might feel like. Some people even think that this is not Joe Biden. But then they compare it to pictures of him 10 years ago. Clearly there are signs of many facelifts. So here's a tension on the temples. And that can change even the shape of an ear if the skin is pulled and attached to an ear, for instance, because of the force balance, that can change the shape of the ear. Some people think he has dementia. That also can change a person or personality. It can make a person unrecognizable. Personally, I think this is Joe Biden, but because of these issues I just mentioned, he's very hard to recognize and he's very hard to read. He himself might even be confused about how he feels.
He would get all American forces out of Afghanistan by May 1. In return, the commitment was made, and that was a year before. In return, he was given a commitment that the Taliban would continue to attack others, but would not attack any American forces. Remember that? I'm being serious. I'm asking you a question. Because before... No, wait a minute. I'm asking you a question. Is that accurate?
This back and forth with the reporter is also a sign of weakness. He, as the leader of the free world, instead of asking, he should be telling how things are.
But Mr. President, respectfully, since I don't think that the issue that, do you think?
Okay, so that's a key moment. So he's not only looking down, he's essentially folding down. He's described as crumbling or being defeated at this moment. So generally, this gesture of looking down and almost praying is an expression of shame and guilt and utter helplessness. For instance, because so many Marines have died. That's certainly one interpretation, that he's defeated and destroyed at this moment. However, let's look at this in slow motion again.
No, but Mr. President, respectfully, since that
So in slow motion, we see that he's smiling. In fact, it's an asymmetric smile. That's a sign of contempt. Hence the alternative interpretations. Here he could show contempt towards himself for how he handled the situation with Afghanistan. So I don't think it's directed towards the reporter. However, the question is, why is he looking down at this moment? Another interpretation is that this is a duping delight, that it's essentially a leaked smile towards the audience, towards the reporters, that they're buying the trickery, that they don't understand the real motivation and real reasons for things, how they happen. For instance, that the whole thing was planned, that the resources of Afghanistan are handed over to China, that the pullout was deliberate to cause a mass migration, to destabilize the world, and so on. Of course, this would be pure evil, but it is a possibility. Or the smile might be a masking smile. So smiles or fake happiness are sometimes used to cover up pain or grief. So let's look at this again.
Mr. President, respectfully, says that I don't think that the issue that, do you think?
So here he's completely folding. It almost looks like he's praying for forgiveness maybe. However, there's a third interpretation, and I mentioned this before, that it is a sign of dementia and a result of the huge cognitive overload he's facing during this press conference. He normally doesn't give press conferences anyways. So it's effectively a gestural retreat. He can't deal with it anymore. So consistent with the dementia idea are his reading of the notes, the walking in the wrong direction, slow speech, the pauses, losing the train of his thought, slurred speech, missing words, wrong words. So we saw that in many other occasions. Against the idea of dementia speaks that he doesn't show any signs of anger or aggression, which is often the case with dementia patients. But this is not the case here. So the family system's interpretation of dementia, like Alzheimer, the individual is considered part of a system of siblings, parents, ancestors, where everyone in the system needs to be acknowledged. And traumatic family events, for instance, like murder or people being morally excluded for what they've done, or any family secrets, can cause symptoms or destructive behavior in the system, essentially to alert the systems that injustice was done. And family system therapy is a kind of group therapy where representatives are used and surprisingly feel like the family members and help by movement and speech to find a solution to resolve the issue. How complete strangers can feel like the family members is unknown currently. One explanation, also not based on current science, is that there's a morphogenetic field or knowing field, whatever that is exactly. A simpler, less exciting view explanation is that people with lots of empathy can read subtle cues and pick up feelings. So now in dementia, a person tries to escape a traumatic experience from their childhood, like war or fleeing from a war, abuse or loss of a parent. The symptoms people develop, for instance in a disease, give us hints towards what the issue is and what needs resolving. So the whole idea behind Richard Nixon's war on cancer, for instance, is completely ill-guided, and we can see this now in retrospect. It just created a billion-dollar enterprise for the pharmaceutical industry, and similar to the war on terror, it really leads to nothing good. So coming back to dementia, so when it becomes progressively more severe, people forget everything around them, the current events, and in the end only remember the past events from their childhood. Often these people try to run away and show aggressive behavior, which makes this even more obvious. So coming back to Joe Biden, we see some signs, but we don't see the aggression and the anger. All of the reasons above are plausible, and they are not mutually exclusive.
That people have an issue with pulling out of Afghanistan or just the way that things have happened?
I think they have an issue.
Based on the length he was in this praying position, I don't think it was a masking smile or a duping delight. I think it was a mixture of guilt and shame and the cognitive overload because of the onset of dementia. However, it's really hard to read his face because of the facelifts. And we also don't know how a person in such a powerful position and in such elite circles would behave or react. But again, his face is completely blank and his eyes are darting around. He is trying to grasp with the facts and his emotions. He is confused. Okay, so I hope you liked my analysis. I hope it was a bit helpful, and I'm looking forward to reading your comments on how you see the situation unfold in Afghanistan and Joe Biden's behavior. Thank you for listening and watching, and talk to you next time. Bye.